In the quiet coastal towns of Eldridge Bay and Greybridge, unsolved murders linger in empty buildings under flickering orange streetlights. Tonight, two chilling tales of night guards uncovering buried secrets, perfect for drifting off to sleep. Welcome to N8 Stories. Story 1. In the quiet coastal town of Eldridge Bay, where fog rolls in from the sea like a heavy blanket every night, the old Whitaker building stands forgotten on the edge of the harbor. Its brick facade, weathered by salt air and decades of neglect, looms under dim orange streetlights that flicker like dying embers. 15 years ago, on a stormy autumn evening in 2010, this very building became the scene of an unsolved murder that still haunts the locals in whispers. Margaret Hale, a 52-year-old archivist who worked late into the night sorting dusty ledgers, was found slumped at her desk in the third-floor office, a single stab wound to her back from an unseen blade. No fingerprints, no weapon, no witnesses, just a locked door from the inside and a window cracked open to the wind. The police called it a tragic mystery, filed it away, and moved on, but the building never forgot. Fast forward to 2025. Ethan Carver, a 38-year-old night shift security guard, patrols these empty halls from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Ethan is the kind of man who blends into shadows, tall and lanky, with wire-rimmed glasses perpetually fogged from the damp air, and a habit of sipping black coffee from a thermos to stay alert through the monotony. Divorced 5 years ago, with no kids or close family, he lives alone in a one-bedroom apartment a few blocks away, his evenings filled with true crime podcasts and marathon reruns of old detective shows. The Whitaker building job suits him perfectly. Low pay, but no crowds, no chatter, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant crash of waves against the pier. He makes his rounds methodically, checking locks on the ground floor storage rooms, scanning the grainy CCTV feeds in the basement booth, and climbing the creaky stairs to the upper floors where the offices sit abandoned, coated in dust and spiderwebs. On his third week, something small but off catches Ethan's eye during his 2 a.m. sweep of the third floor. The door to Margaret Hale's old office, which he'd locked himself at the start of the shift, stands slightly ajar, maybe half an inch, but enough to notice in the silence. He pushes it open, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and sees nothing amiss. The desk, still cluttered with faded files from years past, the chair pushed in just as he left it. But on the floor, near the window, a single key lies gleaming, a master key from the building's maintenance set, one that shouldn't be there. Ethan picks it up, turns it over in his palm. It's cold, unmarked, as if it had been placed deliberately. He pockets it, chalks it up to a previous shift worker's carelessness, and logs it in his notebook. That night, sleep evades him at home, his mind replaying the moment. The next night brings another anomaly. At midnight, while reviewing CCTV footage from the previous hour, Ethan spots a shadow flitting across the third-floor hallway feed. Too quick for a clear image, but humanoid, pausing at Margaret's door before vanishing. Heart rate ticking up, he grabs his flashlight and heads up. The door is locked this time, but inside, the stack of old files on the desk has shifted. The top one, yellowed and brittle, now lies open to a page about the Hale murder. Ethan had never touched those papers. He reads by flashlight, police notes on the stab wound, precise, from a thin blade like a letter opener. No signs of struggle. Hale's habit of working alone after hours. A footnote mentions a missing ledger page from the night of the murder, never recovered. As he closes the file, a faint creak echoes from the stairwell below, like footsteps retreating. Ethan freezes, listens, hears only his own breathing and the wind rattling the window. He double-checks all locks before dawn. Curiosity gnaws at him through the daylight hours. At the public library that afternoon, Ethan digs into newspaper archives on his laptop. Eldridge Bay Gazette, October 2010, archivist slain in locked office, perp eludes capture. Articles detail Hale's solitary life, her role cataloging shipping records for the Harbor Authority. One piece mentions a disgruntled ex-employee, Victor Lang, fired months earlier for embezzlement suspicions, but his alibi held, home with his wife, verified. Police dismissed it. Ethan prints the clippings, pores over them at home. Lang still lives locally, works maintenance for nearby warehouses, access to similar buildings, perhaps keys that match. That night at work, Ethan brings the printouts, spreads them on the CCTV desk. Around 1 a.m., another oddity. His thermos, left unopened on the counter on the booth, now has a faint scratch on the lid, like a deliberate mark from a nail. By the fourth night, Ethan's routine fractures into obsession. He skips his coffee break to revisit the third floor, armed with a small notebook of his own clues. The key from 2 nights ago fits the office door perfectly, but he notices the window latch, rusted shut for years, bears fresh scratches, as if pried recently. Inside, a drawer in Hale's desk, previously stuck, now slides open easily, revealing that missing ledger page tucked at the back. Ethan unfolds it under his flashlight. Entries from the murder night show irregular shipments logged under a false name, crates from an offshore supplier, signed off by Hale, but altered in ink that matches Victor Lang's handwriting sample from the old police file. Ethan cross-references. Lang had access as maintenance, could have slipped in during a routine check, stabbed her to silence the discovery, staged the locked room by exiting the window with a spare key. The pieces align too neatly, but why return now, after 15 years? Statute of limitations passed, case cold. Unless... Tension coils tighter that shift. At 3 a.m., Ethan hears it, a soft scrape from the basement, like metal on concrete. He descends quietly, flashlight off, relying on the glow from exit signs. In the maintenance room, tools lie scattered, and on the workbench sits his own security logbook, open to the page where he'd noted the ajar door. In the margin, scrawled in faded blue ink, "Stop digging." Ethan's blood runs cold. No one else uses blue pens. That's Lang's signature from the old embezzlement reports. The CCTV blind spot covers this room perfectly. Footsteps now, faint, retreating up the opposite stairwell toward the third floor. Ethan grabs his radio but hesitates. Calling police means explaining his unauthorized snooping. Instead, he climbs silently, heart pounding in rhythm with the waves outside. He reaches the third-floor landing. The office door hangs open, light spilling from within, not his flashlight, but the desk lamp flickering on for the first time in years. Inside, a figure hunches over the files. Victor Lang, grayer now, wiry frame tense, stuffing papers into a satchel. He freezes as Ethan steps into view. "You shouldn't have," Lang mutters, voice gravelly from disuse. No chase, no violence, just a stare, eyes hollow with the weight of secrets. Lang slips a photo from his pocket. Ethan as a boy, visiting the harbor with his mother, who worked shipping manifests alongside Hale. "Family ties," Lang says softly. "She found out. I made sure she didn't tell." Ethan backs away, pieces slamming together. His own vague memories of harbor visits, the job he took on a whim. Lang pockets the photo, walks past him down the stairs, vanishing into the fog-shrouded night. Ethan reports nothing. He resigns the next day. The case remains officially unsolved, files gathering dust once more. But on sleepless nights in Eldridge Bay, under those same orange streetlights, locals swear they see 2 shadows in the Whitaker building windows, one old, one new, watching, waiting for the next curious soul. The fog rolls in thicker now, carrying whispers of truths that stay buried. Sleep if you can. Story 2. In the harbor town of Greybridge, nights stretched long and silent, broken only by the low moan of foghorns and the distant clatter of freight trains slipping through the dark. The town lived by its river and died by its shadows, and no place felt more forgotten than the old Riverside Motel on the outskirts, a squat row of rooms pressed against the water like a tired, sleepless sentinel. Once a stopover for truckers and traveling salesmen, it had fallen into disrepair. peeling paint, buzzing neon signs stuck on the word open, and a parking lot that glistened with oil stains when the rain came. Locals avoided it after dark, muttering stories about the murder that had happened there 14 years before in room 12. A young woman named Claire Danvers had checked in, paid cash, and never checked out. By morning, the bed was soaked red, the door locked from the inside, and the river behind the motel swelled with the weight of a missing body that was never found. Years later, the motel's new night manager, Lucas Hale, took the job simply because it offered solitude. Lucas was in his early 40s, quiet, with a calm, steady way of moving that came from years of working late shifts in empty places. He had the look of someone who spent more time watching than speaking. Deep-set eyes, short, dark hair, and a habit of keeping his hands in his jacket pockets. After a failed marriage and a stalled career in accounting, the Riverside Motel seemed like a place where he could disappear into routine. His nights were simple. Check in the occasional traveler, patrol the walkway, and sit behind the front desk with a thermos of coffee, listening to the soft hum of the vending machine and the slow drip of a leaking pipe in the back room. On his 10th night, a soft rain began just after midnight, tapping gently against the office window as Lucas flipped through the old logbooks stored under the desk. The current digital check-in system had replaced them years ago, but someone had saved the dusty ledgers, thick, yellowed books filled with looping names and room numbers. Bored, Lucas opened one from 2011, running his finger down the columns. He found her name by accident: Claire Danvers, room 12, one night, paid in cash. The date matched the year of the murder he had heard rumors about during his brief training. On a whim, he flipped to the next page, expecting the usual neat lines of guests. Instead, he saw a gap, a torn-out page, ripped cleanly from the spine, leaving only a jagged edge. He frowned. The missing sheet sat exactly where any note about what happened afterwards should have been. Lucas closed the book. A strange chill settled at the base of his neck. Around 2 a.m., he decided to walk the perimeter. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a dark blue sedan parked crooked near room 9 and an old pickup beside room 14. Most guests were asleep, their curtains drawn, televisions off. As Lucas passed room 12, he noticed something off. No one had rented it in days. It was supposed to be blocked out in the system due to a leaky ceiling, yet the door stood just slightly open, no more than a finger's width. He knew he had locked it earlier himself. Quietly, he turned the knob and pushed it open. The air inside felt heavier, stale with the scent of old carpet and cleaning chemicals. Everything looked ordinary: a neatly made bed, a small table with a lamp, faded floral curtains. But on the bedside table, resting alone, lay a key tag. An old brass one, stamped with 12 in worn numbers, attached to a metal ring with no actual key. Lucas picked it up slowly. Room keys were plastic cards now. This tag belonged to another era. He slipped the tag into his pocket and did a quick check of the room. Bathroom empty, closet bare. Satisfied, he turned off the light and closed the door firmly, listening for the click of the latch. Only when he returned to the office did he notice that the motel's camera monitor, usually cycling through feeds of the walkways and parking lot, was frozen on a single image, the exterior of room 12. The timestamp in the corner flickered between the present minute at a date from 2011, as if something in the system could not decide which night it belonged to. Lucas tapped the screen, and it snapped back to normal, the feed now showing the empty corridor outside his office. Still, a seed of unease had been planted. The following night, Lucas arrived early. The day clerk, a tired woman named Marlene, was already pulling on her coat. "You're really taking this place seriously," she said with a wan smile as he clocked in. Before she left, Lucas casually asked about the old murder. Marlene's expression hardened, the way someone's does when they step on a buried shard of memory. "Room 12, she said. "We don't talk much about it. Girl checked in alone. They never figured out what happened. The owner at the time was desperate to keep the motel open, so the case got quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me." She hesitated. They had a suspect, a long-haul trucker who stayed that night in room 14. but the logs that could prove he never left his room somehow went missing. Everyone moved on. You should too. With that, she left him alone with the hum of the office. Late that night, the motel seemed to sink into a peculiar calm. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement damp and reflective, mirroring the flickering neon sign. At 1:30 a.m., Lucas heard the faint jingle of metal from the hallway, like keys brushing against a door. He glanced at the monitor. One camera feed, covering the stretch between rooms 10 and 14, briefly filled with static, then cleared. No one visible. Still, the sound persisted. Closer now, then softer, then gone. Lucas stepped out with his flashlight and walked the upper balcony. The cool air smelled of wet concrete and river water. As he neared room 12, he saw something that made him pause. The number plate on the door, which he had passed a dozen times before, now had a hairline crack running right through the one, as if someone had pressed a sharp object against it. Below the plate, a thin scrape marred the paint, fresh, pale against the darker, weathered surface. He tried the handle, locked, just as he had left it after double-checking during his afternoon shift. The keycard in his pocket opened the door with a faint beep. Inside, the room was once again harmless and plain, yet his gaze was drawn to the table. On it lay the old brass key tag he had taken the night before, placed neatly in the center, though he knew he had left it locked in the office drawer. Lucas stared at it for a long moment. Someone, or something, wanted his attention fixed on room 12. The next afternoon, tired but unable to sleep, Lucas drove to the small public records office in town. He requested police reports related to an incident at the Riverside Motel in 2011. The clerk, a man with reading glasses and coffee-stained sleeves, slid a thin folder across the counter. Inside were photocopies of statements, timelines, and a single grainy photograph taken by an officer that night. The image showed the bed in room 12, the outline of a body beneath a blood-soaked sheet, and on the floor beside it, something metallic, a key tag with 12 just barely visible. Lucas flipped through the pages. One statement belonged to the night clerk at the time, a man named Robert Flynn, who insisted he had logged every guest in and out meticulously. But attached to his statement was a note: logbook pages from this date missing, possibly misplaced. Another page listed a potential suspect, Daniel Price, truck driver, room 14. Alibi unclear, records incomplete. That evening, Lucas returned to the motel with a new focus. He waited until after midnight, when the guests were asleep and the town outside had grown quiet. Then he retrieved the old logbook again and studied the torn section. The missing page would have covered the hours between Claire Danvers checking in and the discovery of the bloodied room. If someone had removed it, they had done so with purpose, to erase a record. He ran his fingers lightly along the spine, feeling the coarse edge where the sheet had been ripped out. As he did, a folded slip of paper slid from deeper within the binding and fell onto the desk. It was small, creased with age, and carried the faint scent of mildew. Unfolding it, Lucas read a series of names and room numbers written in hurried handwriting. Claire Danvers, 12. Daniel Price, 14. R. Flynn, office. Next to Claire's name was a short, cryptic note. Asked for room farthest from office, seemed nervous, kept looking at river. Next to Daniel's name, out twice between 2 and 3 a.m., did not log. At the bottom, one last line, underlined twice. Owner says not to record everything, just what people expect. There was no signature, but Lucas suspected it had belonged to Flynn, who had tried to keep his own private record of that night. The more Lucas read, the clearer the shape of the story became. Claire, alone and nervous, had chosen isolation at the far end of the row. Daniel, restless and unaccounted for during crucial hours, an owner who valued the motel's reputation over the truth, and somewhere between them, a set of keys that could open any door and a torn page that could erase guilt. But there was still something missing, some final piece that tethered the past to the present. At 3 a.m., Lucas sat in the office, staring at the monitor. The cameras cycled through their silent surveillance: parking lot, stairwell, balcony outside the rooms. When the feed returned to the stretch that included room 12, he froze. The door was open, not slightly, but fully, just enough to show the dark interior, yet the system listed the room as unoccupied and locked. A faint figure moved past the opening, a blur of gray, more suggestion than shape. It slipped toward the back of the building, where a narrow path led down to the riverbank. Lucas grabbed his flashlight and the brass tag before stepping outside. The air was cooler now, the sky a low ceiling of cloud reflecting the distant town lights. As Lucas approached room 12, the door swayed gently, nudged by a current of cold air from within. He entered slowly. This time, everything felt different. On the bed, the comforter was rumpled, as if someone had just been sitting there. On the table, the brass tag lay on top of a folded motel receipt. Lucas picked it up. The receipt was dated from 2011, stamped paid cash, bearing the name Claire Danvers, but the handwriting for the amount and initials at the bottom matched another sample he had seen in the file. The owner's, not Flynn's. A sound came from behind the room, the soft crunch of gravel near the river path. Lucas stepped out the back door, which opened onto a narrow strip of land sloping toward the water. There, on the edge of the bank, he saw a man standing with his back turned. Short, stocky, with thinning hair and a heavy coat, the silhouette matched old photos of the former owner he had glimpsed in the records office. Yet Lucas knew that man had died years ago. The figure did not turn around. Instead, it gestured once, slowly, to the dark water below, as if pointing to an invisible outline. Then it began to fade, dissolving into the fog that clung to the river's surface. Lucas stepped closer to the edge and shone his light downward. The beam caught on something half buried in mud where the bank sloped steeply. Heart pounding, he slid down the bank and dug it out, hands growing slick with cold mud. The box was locked, but the corroded hinges gave way after a few hard pulls. Inside lay a plastic bag, brittle with age, holding what looked like another ledger page, a few photographs, and a small rusted knife with a thin blade, no longer sharp but still unmistakable. The ledger page completed the missing entry, listing Daniel Price as having left his room at 2:17 a.m. and not returning until 3:04 a.m., directly contradicting his original statement. The photographs showed the old owner exchanging an envelope with the truck driver near the loading area behind the building. Another image, out of focus yet telling, captured Claire at the reception desk, looking over her shoulder with visible unease as the owner handed her the key to room 12. The knife, wrapped in an old motel towel, still carried the faint trace of a brownish stain along its hilt. Lucas stood in the pale glow of his flashlight, the river whispering beside him, the weight of the box solid in his hands. The truth was simple. The owner had orchestrated a quiet cover-up, pressuring the night clerk, hiding evidence, and removing the page that would have destroyed the motel's already fragile reputation. Daniel Price had not been cleared by innocence, but by convenience and fear. Claire Danvers had become a ghost story in a town that preferred rumors over records. He could have taken everything straight to the authorities. Instead, Lucas dried the documents, photographed each page, then placed the originals back inside the box. By dawn, he had buried it in a new spot further along the bank, marking the location in his own private notebook with a simple cross. The motel continued its nights as always. Guests went and came. The neon sign buzzed. Room 12 remained officially off limits due to a maintenance issue. No announcements were made. No headlines appeared. But Lucas changed. He stayed on as night manager, walking the halls with a deeper awareness of the stories that clung to the walls. Sometimes in the hour before sunrise, he would sit at the desk and watch the monitor as the camera lingered on the dark rectangle of room 12's door. On rare nights, he thought he saw a faint shape there, a figure leaning in the doorway as if deciding whether to step out or remain forever in that dim space between past and present. When he felt that presence, he would quietly say, "I know what happened. I remember." The air in the room would seem to relax, the tension thinning just enough for him to breathe easier. The case stayed unsolved on the books. The official file remained thin, incomplete, and unsatisfying. Yet somewhere under the soil of the riverbank, the quiet truth slept in its metal box, and the restless echoes of that long-ago night found at last a listener. In Greybridge, the Riverside Motel kept its lights on, offering rooms to the weary. And if you ever stayed there, far at the end in sight of the water, you might feel the gentle pull of a story you were never meant to hear, tugging at the edges of your dreams, urging you to listen just a little closer before you finally drifted off to sleep.